parable that runs something like this. One day, as the Buddha was sitting under a tree, a young athletic soldier walked by, looked at the Buddha, noticed his weight, and said, "You look like a pig." The Buddha looked calmly at the soldier and said, "And you, my son, look like God." Taken aback by the comment, the soldier asked the Buddha, "Why do you say that I look like God?" The Buddha replied, "Well, my son, we don't really see what's inside of ourselves. We see what's inside of us and project it out. I sit under this tree all day and I think about God. So that when I look out, that's what I see. And you, my son, you must be thinking about other things." There's a thought that the way we perceive and judge is deeply influenced and colored by our own ideals. St. Thomas Aquinas said, whatever is received according to the mode of it, whatever is received according to the mode of its receiver. Our attitude is determined by the environment in which we live. If this is true, then as the Buddha's parable suggests, how we perceive and treat others speaks volumes about what's going on inside of us. If any of us could play back our lives as a video, we would see the countless times, especially when we were young or maybe even this past week, when we were frustrated or angered by something that happened in our immediate environment. This may have caused us to lash out verbally or to have unpleasant thoughts. It can happen at work. It can happen in the checkout line at the grocery store. It can happen at home with our own families. It's in these times, in the daily drudgery, that we don't see anyone in the world as blessed. Instead, like the young soldier looking at an overweight Buddha, our judgments and feelings are harsh. Our negativity about others and the world speaks mostly of how bruised and wounded, ashamed and depressed we are, and how little we ourselves have ever heard anyone say to us the simple, loving words, "In you I take delight." My name is Sanchez, and this talk is titled "The Cursillista Beyond the Cursillo." It's a talk about someone who sat where you are over 20 years ago and ended up where I am, and this is known as the Rectora talk. This is the last day of your Cursillo. You probably understand by now that Cursillo is not an organization or a club. It's a method. You experienced that method here on the mountain this weekend. The goal of our Catholic Church and the goal of the people who attend the church is to save souls. Eduardo Bonin, the founder of Cursillo, summarized the purpose of this movement in this way. It is important that we proclaim the good news that God in Jesus loves us and that we can communicate this through friendship. You don't do this by boxing good people in the church communities. Instead, you choose the best ones and have them return as Christians to their environment. If we live in an environment filled with dissension and anger, then we might reflect that ourselves, and worst of all, that might be the environment in which our children and grandchildren will find themselves living. We are called to bring a Christian influence into the world. We are to begin with ourselves and then reach out to others. Someone chose you to make this Cursillo, not so that you would have an enjoyable weekend, but so that you would go out and live and share what is fundamental for being Christian, not in an isolated way, but in community, forming groups whereby your life and testimony, you too will provide a more authentic, continuous, and progressive Christianity. It would be a little easier to do this if we were like that Buddha, sitting peacefully in the sunshine, quietly under a tree, dedicating our lives every moment to the fulfillment of God's love in the world. The Buddha was totally focused on that. Inside, he was filled with God's love, and that is what he projected. This weekend, we had a little bit of that. We were filled with God's love, surrounded by people in love with Jesus, who were focused on loving us. We felt strong in love and faith this weekend because we encountered others who shared our Christian outlook and encouraged and supported us on the journey. But we know that when we get back to the real world, this level of joy and love in community will be unachievable because there are a lot of distractions. We know what our ideal way to live might be, but it is so difficult to live the ideal life in the environments in which we live. I have always been fortunate because my environments have always been conducive to helping me grow in faith. My story begins years ago. I was born in a small village in the Pyrenees Mountains in the south of France. There wasn't much in the way of employment in that region in those days, and my parents were struggling to make a living. In 1950, my father was able to get a sponsorship to come to work in the United States. He came by himself and became a sheep herder in the frigid Montana countryside. He did this for a year and was able to raise enough money to bring his family to America. I was 3 years old when I immigrated to this country with my mother and 6-year-old brother to join my father. Over the years, my parents progressed from renting a home to purchasing a home and renting out rooms to help pay for the mortgage, to eventually renting a dairy. Finally, they were able to purchase a run-down dairy in the middle of the high desert in Barstow, California. Don't laugh, Susanna Pastel is from there too. My father would later tell me that this, for him, was the American dream. My memories of that old dairy and the rundown house in which we lived was anything but dreamy. But later I came to appreciate what my parents had done for us. In 6 years, my father had gone from sheep herder with virtually nothing to a dairyman with a herd of over 100 Holstein milking cows. Those are the black ones. During all the uncertainty of running a business in this new world, always worried that they wouldn't be able to make it, my parents made sure that my brother and I learned our faith. I don't know how they did it because they both barely spoke any English. They made sure that we attended catechism each week, eventually receiving all the sacraments by the time we completed high school. Excuse me. I remember those days. I was in the first grade at Newman Elementary School. At that time, we lived in Chino, California. A nun in full habit, appreciate that, this one wasn't like those nuns. A nun in full habit would come once a week to the school at the end of the day and walk us in 2 lines for 1 block, holding hands to a house where a family was nice enough to open their home to us. I'll always remember the coziness of their home, the delicious hot chocolate, and how beautiful Sister Mary Margaret was. But mostly, over the years, I have come to appreciate the wonderful people that came into my life to make these kinds of events possible. Even though it was very difficult for them, my parents made sure that we learned our Catholic faith. I think one of the ways my mother learned English was by listening to us practice our prayers for our First Holy Communion. My first year out of high school, I met my husband, Alex. He was a good Catholic. He was a good man. He was a very good husband and father. We have 3 children, Aaron, Matthew, and Pilar. Matthew and Pilar are here today. We have 6 grandchildren. Alex lived to see the first 2. He died of lung cancer in May 2008 after 39 years of marriage. Father Rafferty gave the sacraments talk yesterday. He holds a special place in my heart because Alex and I first met him over 30 years ago when we made a marriage encounter weekend. For many years, he was dedicated to that movement and also has dedicated many years to the Cursillo movement. In his talk, he spoke about how marriage can draw us closer to God. The most wonderful part of my marriage to Alex is that we grew in faith together. Where my parents began my walk, my husband and I were able to bring it to greater fruition through a sacramental marriage and a growing family. We both concurred, my husband and I, for the sake of our children, it was important for us to become involved in the church and to surround ourselves with friends who shared our same values. In those days, we were especially unnerved by the strength of the Protestant evangelical movement, which was very on fire throughout the 70s and 80s. It was drawing many Catholics away from the church. Scariest of all, we had been confronted about our faith by well-meaning friends, and frankly, we didn't have a lot of the answers. Then we had a wonderful encounter with Christ that helped us to put into practice what Alex and I had agreed to do: grow in the love and understanding of our faith. In 1992, my husband and I made a Cursillo. It was very difficult for me to come up the mountain. Alex had come up the weekend before, and I was very eager for me, and he was very eager for me to go on this thing called Cursillo. I had many excuses not to go. My daughter was 7, and we were redoing her room. I had fallen behind painting the wainscoting and baseboards. I hadn't finished the job in time. And Thursday rolled around, and my sponsor, Sue Bartolotta, assured me that everything would be okay. My husband, so eager for me to go, assured me that he would finish the painting for me. My other concern was that my oldest son, Aaron, was bringing his new girlfriend, Leanne, to meet the family. I wasn't going to be there for that, and I was disappointed. Well, thank goodness I wasn't there. It's not until later that I learned the significance of those 2 events. We lived on a large lot of land at the top of a hill. Because of that location, by mid-afternoon, the breeze was very, very significant. My husband discovered this to be quite a problem as he tried to spray the paint onto the baseboards in the backyard. The backyard was very private because it was off to the side of the property. So, my husband decided to solve the problem of the overspray by removing his pants. Thank goodness he kept on his underwear. Meanwhile, Aaron decided to take Leanne on a romantic walk overseeing our property. Well, you guessed it. One of Leanne's most memorable encounters with her future father-in-law that weekend was in that private backyard nook as he stood with the paint can in his hand. So that's what went on at my house the weekend I was. Well, I'm sure nothing like that will happen at your house while you're here. We still laugh about what happened that weekend. Thank goodness Leanne has a sense of humor. She and Aaron were married a year and a half later. They have been married 15 years and have 4 kids. So the paint can story never ruined the romance. In addition to sponsoring my husband and I in 1992, Sue and her husband Don went on to sponsor a few other people. She was a great sponsor, a very wise sponsor, because she understood that Christians can't stand alone. They need friends. Deep, accepting, and generous friends who act as a source of God's grace in this world. That is the Cursillo message we learn up on the mountain. It was Sue's intention that she would get a group of women together to share the Cursillo experience that we had up on the mountain. She introduced me to several other women she had sponsored. We began meeting regularly over breakfast. In forming our group, we wanted to maintain the type of loyal friendships we experienced on our Cursillo weekend. We became a group similarly to the groups you have experienced this weekend. We decided that each time we met, we would begin with a prayer. We have been meeting this way for almost 20 years. This group has become an important part of my life. 3 of my friends are working this Cursillo weekend. They are here today, and I'd like to introduce them to you. Sue has moved to Arizona. She drove all the way out here for these 3 days. Nancy and Lois, they asked me what I wanted them to do on the weekend. I thought... So I put them on the music team. I thought it would be safe. Our dear friend Colleen couldn't make it, and Jerry helped with a lot of the activities we had going on, but she couldn't make it because she's at a wedding. I've sponsored people over the years, hoping to be as good a sponsor as Sue and Don, her husband. To be a good sponsor, you really have to be a good friend. To see that person you sponsored is persevering in their faith and hopefully surrounded by friends too. It was such a thrill to me to sponsor my daughter Pilar, her husband Adam, and my sister-in-law Edna last year. They all 3 worked this Cursillo weekend. Unfortunately, Edna lives in Hemet. I don't know what I was thinking when I sponsored her. There is no Cursillo community to support her out there, we thought. She only knew of one other Cursista in her church, Our Lady of the Valley. So I made it a point to tell her that she needed to get together with a group of women to continue what she had experienced here. I honestly didn't think she could do it. But I love her dearly and wanted her to experience the Cursillo method. So I sponsored her, hoping for the best. Little did I know how much she took after her brother, my husband Alex. She is very persistent. After her Cursillo weekend, she took to heart what I had told her about continuing the Cursillo experience. At her church, after Mass, if someone looked like they might be a Cursista, she would walk up to them and introduce herself and ask them if they had made a Cursillo. She has found some, and she plans to sponsor more parishioners. She now has a group of 5 women she gets together with regularly, and one of them, Jean, is here today. There she is, right there. Our Lady of the Valley, Hemet, California. I am so proud to have sponsored Edna. If I had gone with my first instinct, she would never have made a Cursillo. But as we know, God, through the Holy Spirit, uses us in the most amazing ways. In Cursillo, we are also encouraged to go out and get involved in our churches. During Alex's illness, I was so touched by the fact that someone brought communion to our home. It meant a lot to Alex, and I was very touched by the whole experience. So, a few years ago, I signed up to be an extraordinary minister to the homebound. I began taking communion to Pat and Faye, Lois's in-laws. in their home about 3 years ago, something like that. They were married for over 60 years. When I was visiting them and Pat was in the middle of telling a story and Faye interrupted out of eagerness or because of her hearing impairment, he would just smile and adoringly shrug his shoulders and let her finish the conversation. He adored her. They loved telling me about how they met in New York and how they ran a successful restaurant in the middle of the working district there. Pat died suddenly at home one day 2 years ago. The family was numb when I received a call from Lois that day. She asked if I would just come be with Faye and to pray with the family. I called my good friend Deacon Mitch, who dropped everything to come and give a final blessing to Pat as he lay surrounded by his grieving family and friends. I know that my being there with Deacon Mitch meant a lot to Pat's family. I have been greatly strengthened and supported by this community. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to make many friends. The message of the Cursillo is that on leaving the mountain, we will go out and be apostles, bring God's beautiful message of love into the world. Now, you will go out into the world and wanting to share what you've experienced here. I can tell you that you will get discouraged because everyone out in the world is not ready to hear what you have to share. The world is busy with the stresses of life, but it's not hopeless. You've learned on the mountain there is a technique. That technique is to bring love into the world. By reaching out and being more loving to everyone, especially our families, we can help to open the eyes and ears of the distracted world. Make a friend, be a friend, and bring that friend to Christ. It is important to study and become closer to the knowledge of the gifts God has given you. Surround yourself with a community of friends who share in your love of this beautiful music of love God is sharing with you daily. These friends will help you maintain the courage you need to carry on God's beautiful message. I will leave you with one last story. There was a young man who loved to play his violin. He wanted to share his lovely music with the world. So, one day he decided to go out into the Washington subway during rush hour on a busy morning to help soothe the frantic commuters. He was also curious to see how much the people would pay to hear his music there. He played for a couple of hours, and hundreds of busy people passed by. Hardly anyone stopped to listen, but he did make $27. 20 of that was given him by a woman who was enamored of his playing. When he was done, this young woman came up to him and said that she had seen him playing at the Library of Congress. You see, this young man was Joshua Bell. Some think he's the greatest American violinist. At $140 a ticket, his performances are sold out at the New York Metropolitan Opera. The violin he was playing was a $1 million Huberman Stradivarius. He was playing Bach. In the subway at rush hour, no one stopped to listen. You see, the stage wasn't right for the people to listen. We, as laity in the world, can learn from Joshua Bell's experiment. We cannot change large communities overnight. We need to stop and study the environments in which we live. By being more apostolic in the environments in which we live, we might slowly have the ability to make our environments, the subway stage, into a metropolitan stage. It won't be easy. Our job is to transform the world by our actions. Little by little, we can make a difference. On the last day of my Cursillo weekend over 20 years ago, I realized that the message was for me to go out into the world and spread the word and the love of God. I didn't know how I was going to do this. The Cursillo encourages us to continue this method we learned here on the mountain, surrounding ourselves and being supported by a community of loving friends that are on fire. Several months ago, 20 years after making my Cursillo, when I was asked to be the rectora for this weekend, I didn't hesitate to say yes. I knew everything would be okay. I felt enveloped by the strength and shelter of God's love. Over the years through this community, I have met many people, made many friends, deep, accepting, and generous friends who act as a source of God's grace in my life. After I said yes, and when I was putting together the plans for this weekend, I was totally at peace, because I knew that people would step forward, as I have over the years, to help and be a part of Team Cursillo 271, your weekend. That's the total security of the bond we have in the Cursillo movement. I am surrounded by loving apostolic friends who will step forward to help me. I have a small group of friends that support me. And I also have this larger group of Cursillo friends that support me. Right now, you are surrounded by my loving apostolic friends. And it's together like this that we'll make the world a bigger metropolitan stage for God's love. It can be done. And God will look at us and say, "In you, my dear children, I take great delight." Thank you.